All right, so this is where we finished off last night with all the weight supported by the chain hoist. What we're gonna do this morning is I'm gonna get my transmission jack underneath the transmission, and then we'll disconnect this rear chain because it's hitting the firewall, and then that'll allow us to tilt the motor more and also not be bumping up against that, because as it sits we are not able to push it back any further with that chain. So it's going to be close. You can see the oil pan, it's right there on the cross member, so we're hoping a little bit more tilt. If not, then all we'll do is pull it out a little bit and remove that Y pipe. Was hoping to try to install it with the Y pipe. Never done this before, so we're learning, but it'd be nice to have that all intact. So that's what we're gonna do. So let me get the jack under there and we'll see if this idea works. We're not going real detailed videos on how we're doing this because this is our first time doing it, and we're doing a lot of trial and error. So when I do the excursion, this is what's preparing us for that. And then depending on how that all works, this works, that's how we're gonna move forward with the excursion, and then we'll be a lot more detailed, hopefully get some time-lapse video of it. So I know when we pulled the motor out, we ended up pulling this driver's side motor mount off, and it seemed to really give us a lot more movement to get the engine where we needed it to go. So we may end up doing that, but we'll see. All right, let me get a jack under there. All right, so we got the front hooked up with the chain hoist. Then I lowered the rear down as low as it would go on the transmission jack, and it slid back. Our Y pipe is up underneath there. Right now our oil fill tube is against the firewall and the forward Fickum bracket on this side. So top of the motor is further back than it needs to. What I'm hoping now is I'm going to climb under there and raise the transmission jack down there and see if that will pick up the oil pan high enough to hop over the cross member. So it's kind of the plan. Everything looks good, nothing's bound up. So hopefully just a nice little slide right into where it needs to be. It's only me down here this morning. Kids are taking care of their chores, talking to grandma and grandpa. So I should be down here to help out here shortly. Yeah, so far I'm just going slow, trying not to break anything or get hurt. All right, well, after some struggle, we finally got the motor sitting on. The motor mounts are sitting in the cross member. We don't have it bolted down yet. We're just taking a break and doing a little celebration since we did get it in. Well, I'm thinking about it. We ended up taking the Y pipe off just because it was binding us up and we didn't want to damage it. But it was still a tight fit. I got it bolted to the front of the engine, basically. And then, which was needed because we did have to kind of twist the engine to get it set in place. We have a transmission jack back on the tail shaft or tail housing of the transmission, which we used to help kind of angle it back and forth. And it definitely, it's not a simple slide in, so you're going to be lifting and moving and lifting. I think one thing I'm going to try on the excursion is loosening off I didn't want to remove the downpipe, but at least loosen it off to where we have a little bit more movement and actually turning it sideways maybe, because what we ended up having problems is that or I leave my turbo pedestal off, because that turbo pedestal ended up going right into the downpipe. So probably easiest thing to do would be just to leave the turbo pedestal off, because that's easy to put in with it in the truck. So yeah, that was probably the big thing. It's a lot of weight, a lot of pinch points, so if you're going to do it, keep your fingers out. We did end up taking the transmission tube, dipstick tube off, because it was hitting the heater box when we were trying to get it in. So instead of damaging it, it was easy just to pop it off. So may have to do that. So right now I'm going to put the rear transmission cross member in, and bolt it in place. Then we'll bolt the front engine mounts in. So that way everything's squared up, and we'll get this thing back together. All right, so we're back working on the F350. We got the turbo set into place. We got the Y pipe bolted or clamped to the back of the turbo, and the down pipe clamped. So those are all secured. We don't have it bolted in all the way. We're gonna go down and tighten up the Y pipe on the manifold before we tighten down the bolts for the mount. We got them started, so it's all in position. We got the updated oil drain tube in place, new O-rings. Luke is down there pulling off the front diff cover because we got it up on jack stands to be able to fit underneath there. So while we got it up on jack stands, he's gonna pull the diff cover off so we can change the diff oil, gear oil. He's already drained and refilled the transfer case. I think we put Mercron LD in it, and then I made sure I got some Mercron V for the power steering, since it's pretty much drained completely out. We don't have to worry about flushing it. That'll be done, but the goal right now is I'm going to tighten up the bolts for the turbo, get underneath there. Some of the bolts for the transmission oil pan, we put a new filter in there, went to put the bolts on, and he was missing a couple. I found them, and then now we found that it's like cross-threaded several of them. So I'm gonna get a tap and run a tap through there and try to clean up the threads so we don't have any oil leaks on the transmission pan. And once we're done with that stuff, we got to put a transfer case skid plate on, and we're done. We'll get it down, or done with underneath the truck, I should say. So then we'll get off the jack stands, drop the front end down normal height, so it'll be easier to work on. We'll just start putting everything back together. We kind of got delayed. Went and did some spent some family time, went to the Carson City Hot Springs, different things. Then we got the engine in. So yesterday I went and picked it up from the shipping company, and we're a little disappointed on what we got. I got a couple phone calls in with Kill Devil Diesel. Haven't heard anything back from them, but it's not what I requested. And after all said and done, it took us about 9 months. We've been waiting for this engine. I ordered it September 19th, and I think we're in August 8th, 9th right now. I'm sorry, July 8th or 9th. But keep you posted. We'll be doing a separate video on that, and we will let you know what ends up happening. I'm hoping that they pull through on their end. Yeah, I'll get it. Well, don't kick it though. Now I gotta go look for it. Okay, so Luke's taking this front diff cover off. He put whoever worked on it last. He used Loctite and silicone on the bolts. I mean, the silicone's expected, but that damn Loctite on a diff cover bolt, I've never done that. But it's making for everything is Loctite on this truck. So we'll get it one way or another. I had to I think you put Loctite on the oil pan bolts for the transmission. And then when I went to put the transmission bolts back in, it was like they were cross-threaded. They wouldn't go to torque. It reached torque spec before with like an 1/8 of an inch gap between it and the pan. So I ended up running half of them, running a tap through the bolts to clean it all up. Now it's all back together. So the only thing I can imagine is they either cross-thread the bolts or put Loctite in there and it hardened, and now that doesn't want to let the other bolts in. So crazy. Another adventure. All right, got the differential cover cleaned up. We got the differential cleaned up, all the oil wiped out of it. Cleaned off the silicone and stuff down there. We're gonna get some silicone on this cover and put her back together. Then we can take this down off the jack stand. So far we're finishing up the rear or the front differential fluid. We've changed the transfer case fluid. I had to run a tap through the transmission oil pan bolt holes because I believe they use Loctite and that just wouldn't let the bolts go back in. So ran a tap through those. That's working now. Replaced the fuel filter down there off the low pressure fuel pump. Let's see, what else did we do? Oh, and we tightened up the Y pipe to exhaust manifold bolts. So should be good down there once we get oil in this. And we'll drop it off jack stands, start working on the motor. All right, we're moving right along. Turbo's all buttoned down, got the heat shield installed, got the oil drain or oil supply tube installed with new gasket O-rings. We topped off the top of the turbo with some oil. We got the oil filter housing installed. This one is from the Excursion. I'm not going to be using this one because I'm doing a regulated fuel return on that one. This one's got the Blue Spring update, so it's got the correct fuel pressure for the injectors already in it. The reason why I have this Sinister cap is a quick short story. Got the truck, we were getting ready to head to, we bought the truck and I replaced the injector after we bought it, and we took a trip. We were planning on taking a trip to Dallas and had a fuel leak from the plastic housing that was on there. I called the Ford dealership in Carson City the morning that we were supposed to leave. They said they had one. I drove up there. They didn't have one. So we drove back, got on the road. Or I called a Ford dealership in Kingman, Arizona, which was on the way. They said they had one. Drove all the way there and they didn't have one. So we just continued with the fuel leak. Ended up getting to, I tried a Dorman, Kragen type O'Reilly Dorman cap. It leaked. So that drove me nuts. So we ended up driving to Dallas, and I ordered this from Sinister Diesel. I had it delivered in Dallas, put it on there, never had any problems. So nice thing is I can check my fuel pressure right there, put a nipple in there, run a gauge, and I can test my fuel pressure. So which we will be doing, as we want to make sure we got new injectors on this. So once we get it running, we're going to do a fuel pressure under load test, make sure we're getting the correct fuel pressure. We don't want to destroy these new injectors because of low fuel pressure. So right now we got new O-rings, new filters, oil and fuel, new fuel filter down in the frame, so that's all good. The oil system's closed up. Now we're installing our fuel lines. I'm taking these off the Excursion because he had boogered up his pretty bad. While I'm doing it, I'm replacing my factory banjo bolts with these. So this is an upgraded banjo bolt. You can see how they removed that little check valve, whatever it is in there. And it came as a kit. Here it is. This is the kit that I got. It's for 6 liters and 6/4. Comes with 2 banjo bolts and 4 of your sealing washers. So works perfect. So it's gonna have new banjo bolts, new sealing washers, and we should be good to go. The Excursion, I'm not running this setup. I'm going to be running a regulated fuel return, so it'll be completely different. All right, we're going to probably try to get these fuel lines on here all buttoned up so the fuel system's closed up, and then I think we're going to call it a night. It's almost 8 o'clock, so been a long day. We're hitting close to 90 degree or 100 degree temperatures, so we're kind of slowing down, but we'll get it. I think it's looking nice, looking like a motor. This little piddly, so this little intricate stuff tends up tying up a lot of time, but we're getting there. Luke's a trooper. And then the fact we're having to run a tap through a lot of these holes to clean out the Loctite, that's just ridiculous. But I think we'll have a good motor. And this thing will be running, and we'll be able to use it while we figure out what's going to happen with the Excursion. Okay, so we got our new banjo bolts installed. Our fuel system, that's one rail, goes up, got its bolt there, goes across up to the fuel filter housing. The other one's down here. It goes up to the back of there. And tomorrow I'll hook up the supply and return lines, which dump right there. And we're done with the fuel system. So once we get everything hooked up, we get the batteries in, we'll cycle. Well, we didn't tighten this down. We're leaving it loose so I can take it off, and we'll cycle the pump on until this fills up. We want to push as much air, get it out of there. And then I think you got to cycle the key a couple times to get that fuel system purged, and then we should be good. I'll just have to purge from there to the injectors themselves. So, all right, we are going to call it a night. We're both hot and tired. Go get some cold drinks and relax and watch a little TV before we do it again tomorrow.
It's gonna be fun.
The boys are in charge of cooking breakfast tomorrow and dinner. So I think we're making biscuits and gravy for breakfast and smash burgers for dinner. So Mom made some homemade potato salad. So we're gonna have burgers, smashed burgers, potato salad, and corn on the cob. All right, so we're gonna call it a day. Got pretty much most of the wiring harness installed. I'm using a newer, I guess would be the 04.5 and newer wiring harness. I'm gonna see how it works. Got it on eBay. It's not as good as the factory, but I think it'll work. Clipped into the FICM real good. So the original injector harness was cut on this one. So I was going to use the Excursion one, and then I pulled the Excursion and one of the injector plug connectors came apart. So I spliced in a good connector onto it. So we have that all connected. Injectors are hooked up. Everything's connected on the driver's side, besides the thermostat housing. And this is for the fan. Got to zip tie some wires up, get that out of the way. We'll put this power steering pump on. I got to hook up the crankshaft position sensor, get the glow plug control module set up and plugged in on that side. But we're it's coming along. I think we're doing really good. And tomorrow morning I'll get this is the connections for the battery, or the alternator, sorry. Reinstalled the ground. You can see how it was chafing on this one. So we're gonna wrap it up real good and then check everything out. We cleaned up the ground connection to the frame and on the engine. So we're doing good. Fuel system's complete. Oil system's complete. Electrical should be complete tomorrow, and then I'll start putting pulleys and fan on the front. Then we put the truck together. So we're pretty excited. So this is, I'm not recording every little thing on this one. Number one, it's kind of like a Franken motor trying to get an 06 motor working in an 03 truck. There's a lot of differences. The 06 won't have the connections to this or this, but there's nothing here. In 03, they had the controllers here, but there's no butterfly valve in there. So it's just kind of, I think it'll throw a soft code. It won't throw a check engine light, but I'll deal with that. Little things like that. But you can pretty much find everything that I'm doing online. When I do the Excursion, I'm going to be a lot more in depth because there's going to be a lot of custom work done to that one. But this is, I probably will have to get a new 05 and newer lower radiator hose. I think my heater hose connection here should work good coming from the reservoir tank area. My boost pressure comes right off of here. On the 06s, it's back here. I think my harness, I think it's this connector here. So this should work right here. I'm just going to be rerouting it the best way we can. But yeah, there's so many videos on how to install a turbo, install the fuel lines, everything that I've done here. I don't want to just repeat the videos. So a lot of good videos out there. Check out Diesel Tech Ron. I think Powerstroke Customs LLC. He does a really good job. He used to be 660 doctor or something like that. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there. This is just, I'll do a final video on all the challenges or things you got to deal with to put an 06 and an 03 truck once I get this thing running. And it gives me an idea what I got to do to the Excursion, because I'm basically, my plan is to do the same. We'll see what Kill Devil Diesel comes up with. But the Excursion is going to be a lot more custom. So I'll be running a regulated fuel return. So it's going to be all unique. I'm going to be running a different type of fuel pump and filter system, a different remote oil filter, plus a bypass oil filter. I'm going to do an external oil cooler. So it's got quite a bit to do. I do have to, probably while it's easy to do, I'm going to splice into my blue wire there. I think it's the blue wire for my fans so I can wire it into a switch. So I just splice into one. I think, like I said, the blue wire, I run a wire back into the cab, I get a switch in there so I can do a manual on my fan. Say if I notice it's running hot or I've got a long pull and I don't want to wait for it to get hot for the fan to kick in, I'll flip the switch. What I did notice on my Excursion, the fan doesn't kick on until the temperature's up there above 220. On my pickup that I had, the F350 07, the fan would kick on right around 212 to 215 coolant temp. So I like that a lot better. I don't know. We'll see how this works out. This will have a bigger pump. So, all right, I'm gonna call it a night. Tomorrow morning, I'll get down here, finish up the wiring, get the air conditioning pump all hooked up, get the power steering pump in, and then start putting the pulleys on and build the front end back up. So, pretty excited. We made a mess down there on the floor with gear oil, but yeah, tomorrow. You can see the center one is the harness that I replaced from eBay. So I bought two of them, one for this truck, one for the Excursion, and then I got to buy an injector harness for the Excursion. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting this run. I'm hoping Tuesday. Today's Sunday night. I'm hoping be pretty far ahead tomorrow. Maybe even get it to fire off. Probably won't have the headlights and grill in, but have everything else closed off. But who knows? It doesn't take much to put the headlight in. So, okay, I just wanted to point out, as I'm installing my cables and wires and stuff, hoses, I'm looking for signs like this, where it's obviously shorting out, rub through the insulation on it. So I'll do is tape that up and then get some, I got some old hose, I'll wrap around it as well. And then when I install it, I'll try to pay attention, figure out what that's rubbing on. Looks like possibly the side of the battery or something. So we'll get it. Got the air conditioning compressor installed, got my cables routed. This plug here, I could not get it to seat. So if you look in there, there's a little rubber seal. The seal was actually too thick. So I just took some of my shop scissors, trimmed just like a 1/16 of an inch off, and she locks in there perfect and seals. Got that done, got it routed up away from the pulleys. This is your crankshaft position sensor that's installed behind the air conditioning compressor. I believe the camshaft sensor is back here. So I think I'm gonna attach my AC lines, give it a once over, fix this electrical ground wire, and then I'm done on the, oh, I gotta install this tube, the coolant tube that goes up to your heater. I'll get that installed. I'm gonna look for a new seal for it. Then I'll move over to the driver's side. We'll get the power steering pump bolted up, thermostat housing. I'll probably use an old thermostat housing off the previous engine, take the thermostat out so I can run engine flush through it, just to clean everything out. So yeah, I'm gonna finish up on this side, then we'll move to that side, get everything hooked up, and then we'll focus on the front of the engine. Just to give you an example of how much Loctite this guy used, this is the alternator. My bolts don't even go through there. Should be nice and loose. You can see. So it's like you poured a bottle of Loctite in each hole. So I'm gonna clean these out. This intake is not the original. This is the updated intake 05, 06. So clean this out and get the alternator on. All right, I'm just doing my fan mod. And what you do, you take the blue wire. I used a splice connection at one time, and after a couple 100 miles, it quit working. It just worked loose. So I went to a soldered connection on my Excursion and never had a lick of problems. So that's what I did. I snipped my blue wire. I used these low temp solder joiners, and I fed in my, I'm just gonna do the lead so it's ready to go. I'm not gonna wire it into my dash yet. I gotta get a switch. And then soldered it back together. These things work really good. I just use a heat gun. And once you let it cool, go ahead and give it a pull test to make sure it did seat in there good. You should see that solder start melting through strands of wire. So all this is you're taking the blue wire, splicing it in, then you take one wire into your dash, you wire it into a switch, and then the other side of the switch, you just wiring it to a good ground. Sorry, it's pretty hot today. So basically when you want to turn your fan on, you flip your switch, it grounds the fan out, because that's what that does with the computer. The blue wire goes to the computer and then sends it to a ground when the temperature gets to a certain temp. So on this one, you'll flip the switch. It takes a few seconds for the fan to engage, and then it'll run at 100%. And then when you shut it off, it's going to take a few seconds for it to shut off on its own. It's not at the flick of the switch. So, but it does help. I like it because if I know it's hot, I'm pulling a load up a long hill, I can kick that fan on before the temperatures get too hot, and it's just maintaining that temperature. Or for whatever reason, my temperature switch goes out and my engine's running hot, I can kick it on. Now, when I do the excursion, I'm going to have actually 2 pigtails coming off, 2 leads. One lead's going to go to the switch, and the other lead's going to go to an oil temp switch, which will do the same thing. It'll ground it out when the oil temp gets to, say, 210, 212, and it'll kick the fan on with the oil temperature. So, but I'm going to do a separate video on how to do this wiring, and then when I do the excursion, it'll be an in-depth video as well. It'll work good. So, we got that wired in, just letting it cool. I'm going to give it a tug test. I'll put it back in the wire loom, tape it all up, and I think we're ready for the shroud. We got the tensioner on, we got all the belts, power steering pump, air conditioning, alternators wired up, hooked up. All the connections are connected except for our electric fan. So I think we should be able to put the fan shroud on and then start putting the front truck together. We'll get this front member on with the intercooler, then the radiator. We'll be close to giving this. I think we might be able to give this a test run tonight, hopefully. All right, so far we're doing good. I think we got everything on here that we need to. I went ahead and installed the degas bottle. We got this hose. This is a new hose. The other one was rotted. Actually, I think it was missing because they had a screw in the radiator. So that hose is on there. We got this one from the intake manifold over to the degas. We got that one connected down there. I got this one to here. So this is a little different on the 05.6 engine, but this hose still works. So I think the other one's just a shorter neck, something like that. But this is drastically different. So I don't know. Once I get it on there, the radiator on there, I'll see if I can make the hose work. If not, we'll order one. But yeah, I think everything's on there. Looking good, I think. Everything's connected. Oh, here's the fan. So you can see I just looped it and taped it. So when I'm ready to, I can solder this wire and run it into the cab. Looks nice and clean. Can't even tell it was done. So this will plug into the fan controller. No thermostat. This is the old thermostat housing. You can see the stuff in it, but took the thermostat out. We'll run the cooling system flush through the engine. Get it good and washed out. Then we'll rinse the engine out, and then we'll get our extended life coolant in there. So should be soon.
But that's going to be it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one where we get it all put together. See if the truck runs. Thanks for watching.